In this video, I'm going to be talking about the recently announced Sony Burano, and I'm going to be sharing some thoughts from a Sony FX6 user perspective. Here's the story. All right, so for this video, in order for it to have some sort of logical progression, I'm going to be reading the Sony media release from Sony Asia Pacific about the Sony Burano. So it starts off with, Sony announces Burano, the newest addition to Cine Alta family of high-end digital cinema cameras. Burano combines outstanding cinematic images and exceptional mobility for single camera operators and small crews. Well, so far that sounds great. As I read through this media release, I'm going to share some of my thoughts. And as I said, I'm a Sony FX6 user. I also shoot with the Sony A7R5 and also the A7S III. So I'm deep in the Sony ecosystem. And when I first saw this video announced, it was quite interesting to me. So let's go through the media release and see what kind of features this has and if this is a video camera that might be something that is appealing or really targeted at me as a video producer. The first thing that I see is its exceptional mobility for single camera operators and small crews. Well, that sounds like me. So far tick, let's keep reading. Sony is pleased to announce the new Burano camera as part of the Cine Alta lineup, the company's top line of digital cinema cameras. The new Burano features a sensor that matches the color science of the Venice 2 and is specially designed for single camera operators and small crews. This camera combines exceptional image quality with high mobility and is the world's first, and then there's a little footnote next to it, digital cinema camera with a PL mount to feature in-body image stabilization. All right, so they're pretty much just dropping bombs right from the start because image stabilization is one of the biggest features that, as a Sony FX6 user, I really wish the Sony FX6 had. Now, we keep hearing, or we have heard in the past, that if you want to have a camera that has the built-in variable ND and IBIS, or in-body image stabilization, it just can't happen because of physics and they just can't make it work. But apparently, this new cinema camera has inbuilt image stabilization, or IBIS, so let's keep reading. In addition, the compact housing includes for the first time both a thinner than before electronically variable ND filter structure alongside the optical image stabilization mechanism, a technological feat never achieved previously. Wow, that sounds pretty amazing right from the beginning. And that first footnote, if I scroll down a little, as of September 2023, based on Sony research among cameras with standard equipped PL mount. So that means that, as far as they know, this is the first camera to be able to have in-body image stabilization and a built-in ND, which is pretty amazing. Let's read on. When removing the PL lens mount, the camera can be used with E-mount lenses and supports fast hybrid autofocus and subject recognition autofocus, even perfect for fast-moving subjects. Well, that was one of my other big concerns about this camera. What kind of lens mount would it have? Because it's a Cine Alta camera, I was expecting it to have a PL mount, but to then hear that there is an E-mount as well, and I can use all my Sony E-mount lenses that I've been acquiring over the last few years with autofocus, that is really appealing to me as a Sony FX6 shooter. That means that I don't need to go investing into other lenses or PL lenses that won't necessarily have autofocus. I can already use the lenses that I already have and use the autofocus capabilities as well, which I love about the Sony FX6. So that's a big tick for this camera as well. All right, moving on to main features. Powerful 8.6K full frame sensor. Well, that sounds pretty good. Using the widely appreciated color science of the Venice cameras, Burano features an 8.6K full frame sensor that shares most of the Venice 2 specifications, enabling it to work alongside that camera in all types of productions. Well, that doesn't really appeal too much to me because I'm probably never going to shoot with a Venice 2, but that's nice to know. The sensor features dual base ISO of 800 and 3200 and 16 stops, and then another little asterisk next to that and a little footnote, of latitude to produce stunning images even in the most challenging lighting conditions. So for that footnote, it says S-Log3 shooting, Sony measurements. So if you're wanting the 800 ISO and the 3200 ISO, you need to be shooting in S-Log3, which is fine because that's what I typically shoot with my Sony FX6. And this is probably the first kind of gotcha that I see with this camera. I'm so used to the Sony FX6 having the low 800 ISO and then the 12,800 high ISO. Having it drop down to 3,200 ISO was the first thing that kind of made me go, ooh, that's not as good as what I've already got with my Sony FX6, and was probably one of my first concerns. But after thinking about that, I did consider that some of the shoots that I go on, I get put into these really dark rooms to cover events, and I need to get nice, smiling and happy shots of people enjoying each other's company, and these events are typically around a meal or something like that, and the lighting is low, and I need to have a camera that can capture really nice images in low light. And having that 12,800 really has got me out of a lot of trouble with some of these gigs. I know in the past, using cameras that didn't have a very good high ISO output, it ended up giving me images that were really smushy and lots of noise and barely usable, to be honest. But I find that the Sony FX6, although there is a little bit of noise in that high base ISO, it's still completely usable, especially for the clients that I'm shooting for. So I was then thinking, well, can I really drop down to 3200? And the difference between 3200 and 12,800 is 2 stops. So every time you double your ISO, you're getting another stop. So 3200 then goes to 6400 and then 12,800. So that's 2 stops of light that I'll be losing. But fortunately for me, I do use lenses that can go to either f2.8 or even an f1.2 with my 50mm lens. So it's not necessarily a deal breaker going to the 3200 from 12,800, but it is definitely something that may make me want to hire this camera out before purchasing it, just to test out how it really does perform in low light situations. Or I just watch some YouTube videos of other people that shoot in low light and then make an educated decision based on their findings. Let's keep going. Like all cameras in Sony's full-frame cinema line, Burano will have the ability to shoot at full frame, Super 35, and also feature a D-squeeze function for anamorphic lenses. I know anamorphic lenses is interesting to a lot of people. I'm not really interested in anamorphic lenses. For the types of shoots that I do, I'm mainly interested in the Sony GM lenses. So that's nice to know. It can film at frame rates including up to 8K at 30 frames per second, 6K at 60 frames per second, or 4K at 100 frames per second. And then there's a little asterisk footnote. Let's go to that to see what they have to say. Please check Burano product website here for details on image scan modes. So if I do go to that, and I went to it before, it does talk about how when you're shooting in 4K 120 that there is a crop, and that's probably one of the biggest red flags I have for any camera, really. If I'm purchasing a full frame camera, I'm expecting it to be a full frame camera. Right now I'm shooting with the Sony a7R5 and I love this camera, but my biggest concern is when I shoot in 4K 50 is that it crops to Super 35. And when I purchase a full frame camera, especially at the price for the a7R5, it is a little bit annoying to have that crop. I'd much rather have a full frame camera that I can shoot in all the different modes and have it full frame the entire time. So I know I'm probably asking for too much, and I do realize that maybe the next camera that comes along, there won't be the crop, but it's just a little bit frustrating right now where I don't have the camera that can shoot with no crops in some of those high frame rate situations. So in regards to the different frame rates and resolutions, that's probably one of the things that I'm looking at and thinking, how's that going to affect my workflow? Is that something that is a deal breaker, or is that just a gotcha that I just really have to work around? So I haven't really made my mind up about that yet, but we'll keep moving on. Burano features a compact and lightweight body for high mobility, approximately 32 millimeters shorter and 1.4 kilograms lighter than the Venice 2 camera. Burano is housed in a rugged magnesium chassis, making it suitable for filming in most challenging environments. The camera and accessory packaging bag materials are made primarily of plant-based cellulose, I'm not sure if I'm saying that right, instead of plastic as part of Sony's effort to be environmentally conscious. Moreover, a molded pulp cushion is used on the camera as the cushioning material, thus not using expanded polystyrene. Good to know. All right, here's something that's interesting. Built-in optical image stabilization. Burano is the world's first digital cinema camera with PL mount to support in-body image stabilization. With a newly developed image stabilization mechanism and control algorithm that leverages the advanced image stabilization technology cultivated in the Alpha trademark series of mirrorless interchangeable lens cameras, unwanted camera shake, such as movement from shooting handheld or walking, can be corrected when shooting with an E-mount or PL mount lens. Now that sounds amazing because one of my biggest concerns with the FX6 is there's no image stabilization, and I do find that when I'm going handheld, even when I'm using my Cine saddle, that I can get some jitters or shots that don't look as smooth or as stable as I would like them to look. So having that built-in optical image stabilization is definitely something that is appealing to me, and something that would be a great option to have in the camera, especially if you're able to turn it off. I'm not sure if it will be something that's always on or if you can turn it off. If you can choose to have it on or off, that would be great. But having that option to have it in the camera is something that is very appealing to me. Variable ND filter for added control and exposure optimization. Burano is equipped with an electronic variable ND filter from 0.6, which is 2 stops, to 2.1, which is this many stops. I'm assuming 7 stops, enabling easy adjustments in various lighting conditions. In addition, the electronic variable ND filter allows control of the depth of field with the iris and adjusts to the optimum exposure without changing the depth of field. So I love the variable ND in the Sony FX6. The fact that it is in this Burano camera is awesome, and the extra fact that it's also paired with the image stabilization is making this camera look really appealing to me. E-mount lenses for an increased choice. More than 70 E-mount lenses can use the excellent image stabilization function cultivated with Alpha trademark, as well as fast hybrid autofocus that combines the benefits of phase detection and contrast detection method, and are also compatible with high precision subject recognition autofocus using AI. Using an E-mount lens further reduces the weight and size of the camera. So I'm a big fan of the E-mount lenses. That's great. The fact that I can use the lenses I already own on this camera, yep, that's a big win. And I would also assume things like lens breathing compensation will also be available in this camera. Updated body design for greater ergonomics. Burano also includes design improvements based on feedback from the filmmaking community. That's great to hear. For example, all menu buttons are positioned on the camera operator's side. Additionally, tally lamps are placed in 3 locations to make it easier for the surrounding crew to check the shooting status. The 3.5-inch multi-function LCD monitor can be used as a viewfinder for touch focus or menu control. Well, that's great because I love being able to use the LCD screen with the Sony FX6 to be able to get my focus on different subjects, so that's really handy to have. The Burano also comes equipped with an optional robust T-handle, viewfinder arm, 2 3-pin XLR audio inputs, and a headphone terminal, stereo mini jack, convenient for solo operators. So one of the big things that people don't like about the Sony FX6 is there's no XLR inputs on the body. You have to have the handle to be able to use XLR inputs into the camera. This solves that problem. So that's a big win for people that didn't like that in the FX6. So that's great to know. And I've also seen in other videos that if you want to use the Sony FX9 handle, I'm not sure if the FX6 handle works, but if you want to use that with the Burano, you can. And then that then allows you to use the MI shoe or the hot shoe on top of that handle to then use other things like the Sony dual channel receiver, which I do own. And that would be a great feature to have with this Burano. So if I was to get the Burano, I would look at getting the FX9 handle or do a little research and find out if the FX6 handle works or whatever handle works, just so I'm able to get that MI shoe, that hot shoe functionality into the Burano. Recording formats for added workflow flexibility. The Burano can record from HD to 8K depending on the resolution, aspect ratio, and codec. Burano supports multiple internal recording formats such as the new XAVC-H trademark for 8K, which uses the MPEG-H HEVC H.265 high compression efficiency codec. Other recording formats include XAVC and XOCN-LT. XOCN is Sony's original compressed RAW format that can capture information shot with 16-bit linear data, which gives filmmakers more freedom in post for color grading. XOCN-LT can reduce file transfer time and storage size load, making post-production workflows more efficient than standard versions of RAW data. Burano is also equipped with 2 new CF Express Type B memory card slots and supports VPG 400, which can sustain high bitrate writing of video data, including XOCN-LT 8K. Sony will also be releasing new compatible CF Express Type B memory cards, and they will be in 1,920GB flavors and 960GB. So right now I can see that they're changing the media type, which was a little bit annoying when I first heard that because I'm locked into these CF Express Type A and V90 SD cards that I'm using with my Sony FX6, my A7R5, and my A7S III. And I really like having consistency across all my cameras and not having to worry about having a whole bunch of different cards and card readers just to be able to offload my footage. What I really like about the Sony FX6 and the other cameras is I can put the CF Express Type A card directly into one of the 2 slots, or put an SD card if I turn it around and put it into the same slot. And there's no problems with it. Of course, the CF Express Type A cards are more expensive than the SD V90 cards, so that's one thing I do need to think about. But after thinking about the fact that they're going to CF Express Type B, I do know that the Type B cards are faster. I have used Type B cards before when I used to shoot with the Panasonic S1, and I had no problem with the cards. I had Wise, I think 256 gig card, and I used one of their readers. There was no problem, but yeah, the fact that now I'm going to have to invest into more media as opposed to using the media I already have with my current Sony cameras was a little bit annoying, but also thinking about it going into the future, having faster cards, meaning faster transfer speeds and all that, will end up probably being a bit more of a help than sticking to the CF Express Type A. And I was actually thinking not that long ago, I wonder how long Sony is going to be using these CF Express Type A cards. Is this going to be going long into the future, or are they going to just come up with another format again? And it looks like they're going across to CF Express Type B, so we'll see how that plans out. Moving on, versatile and efficient production ecosystem. Burano supports various log recording modes, including S-Gamut 3 and S-Gamut.Cine, which are color spaces that cover a color gamut exceeding BT 2020 and DCI P3. Burano can reproduce the same color as all cameras in Sony's cinema line, including the Venice 2. This allows filmmakers to match cameras within the line. That's good to know. As I said earlier, I probably won't be using the Venice 2 anytime soon, but the fact that it's got S-Log 3 means that I should be able to match other Sony cameras that shoot S-Log 3 fairly easily in post, which is great to know. Burano comes with 4 new cinematic looks: warm, cool, vintage, and teal and orange, in addition to supporting industry standard S709 and 709 lookup tables. Furthermore, like the Venice series amongst others, Burano can be used for virtual production using large screen LED displays such as Sony's Crystal LED Verona. The camera also features Gen Lock. So for me, that's a nice to know and is not really a deal maker or deal breaker. Sony will be releasing separately the GP VR100 grip remote control for the Burano's main unit to control the zoom lever and recording start-stop button, particularly useful in solo shooting setups. And yeah, that grip does look good. I'm not necessarily sure if I will be purchasing it, but that might be a nice to know just in case down the road I do need it for different types of setups that I might find myself in. Burano will support the S700 protocol over Ethernet and a 1.5x de-squeeze display function when using anamorphic lenses in July 2024 or later. Further updates based on user feedback and suggestions will be rolled out in the future. So once again, that's nice to know, but I'll keep moving on. Continuous enhancement of Cinema line in both hardware and software. Cinema line is a series of camera products for content creators which delivers not only the coveted cinematographic look cultivated through extensive experience in digital cinema production, but also the enhanced operability and reliability that meet discerning creators' various needs. Set to continuously evolve, Cinema line currently includes the high-end Cine Alto cameras Venice, Venice 2, Burano, as well as the various FX models and the unique FR7 PTZ camera. From a software perspective, the newly launched mobile app Monitor and Control, part of the Sony Creators Cloud, can be used with the FX3, FX30, amongst others. The app, designed with visual creators in mind, enables wireless video monitoring, support for high precision exposure determination using false color and waveform monitors, and intuitive focus operation of compatible cameras on the screen of a smartphone or tablet. Burano will also be compatible with this app. I've used this app, I think, once or twice, I believe, and one of the reasons that I don't continue to use it was because I didn't really like the quality that was being transmitted, and I also found there was a little bit choppy, there was interference, so I've actually gone with getting a Teradek Serve Micro, and I find that the quality with that system is more reliable than the Wi-Fi signal or the signal that is being sent from the camera to the iPad or smartphone. So that is one thing to consider with that app. So it might sound really good, but then you get out into the field and then you're not able to connect it, or you might be around an area where there's lots of Wi-Fi signals in corporate environments. This is very common. This happened to me. I was trying to use the app. We were out the back of a busy store, and for whatever reason, we were in a dead zone, and I just wasn't able to get the monitor to work I wasn't able to get the monitoring to work with the iPad or any of the smartphones. So that is something to be aware. It might sound good, but it might not necessarily be 100% reliable all the time, but I could be wrong. Now, moving on to availability. The Burano CF Express Type B memory cards and new GP VR100 grip remote control, sold separately, will be available in Asia Pacific from March 2024 or later. That or later is actually quite important. So really, this camera, although it's been announced, it's not available. And then when you actually start to look at how much this camera does cost, which isn't mentioned here, I did see it was going for about 25,000 US. And that's a lot of dollary-doos when you translate that and convert it into Australian currency, which is where I live and is what I will be paying to purchase this camera. So really, the camera does sound great. My biggest concern is probably the resolutions and that kind of stuff with the crop and that kind of stuff. But also the price. For what I could pay to get that camera, there are a few things that this camera does offer that my FX6 doesn't have. So it doesn't have the image stabilization, which looks really good. And one thing that I've seen in another video but wasn't covered there is the Burano has a V-Lock battery power, which is great because I use a lot of V-Lock batteries. I've got the V-Lock plate on my Sony FX6. However, the gotcha with that is, yeah, you can power the Burano with the V-Lock, but there's no other power distribution outlets on the camera. So if I'm wanting to power my monitor, which I do, I want to be able to power my monitor from my V-Lock battery or power it from the camera, I'll then have to either get an additional piece of equipment to make the camera even bigger so it's got those extra ports, or I'll need to plug it directly into the V-Lock battery, which I have. That is an option, but then it's just an extra annoyance of always having to open the tab, plug that in. And I really like with my FX6, I can just plug all the things into the battery plate, change the battery, nothing's plugged into it, put a new battery on, and then I'm up and running again. So there's little gotchas like that I'm sure there are workarounds, and I just need to do the research and find it. But overall, this camera does look really appealing. If I had the money, yeah, sure, I would definitely purchase it. However, with video production, and I've said this in previous videos, there's always something that you can purchase. So do I spend $25,000 US on a new camera, which might solve a couple of problems and make my shooting experience just a little bit better and marginally increase the production value that I can produce between my FX6 and the Burano? Or do I purchase a grip van or a van that I can use to house all my equipment as opposed to using my current Ford Mondeo instead? So these are the things that I'm thinking about. Am I going to purchase the camera? Well, the fact that it's coming out in March, I've got a bit of time to think about that. So I'll probably be consuming more Burano content from people online, learning about it as much as possible, looking at my finances, seeing if it's something that is realistic to purchase. But ultimately, in the end, one thing that I've noticed with Sony is whenever they bring out these new features, so for example, image stabilization and a variable ND, eventually it trickles down to other cameras. So I wouldn't be surprised that in 18 months time or so, there's a FX9 II, and it has the built-in ND, it's got lens breathing compensation, and also the image stabilization as well. And then maybe in 2 years time, or however long it may be, an FX6 II comes out and wow, there it is. There's the image stabilization, built-in variable ND, and who knows, maybe some new AI thing that Sony's come up with between now and then. So I don't know if spending $25,000 is a wise investment for the types of videos that I'm doing. And maybe I just need to exercise a little bit of patience and wait for these new features that look really cool in the Sony Burano to trickle down to the I guess, lower tier cinema line, which I am currently pretty happy with, but there can always be room for improvement. And that's the video. I hope you found this video helpful, and if you did, please give it a like. And if you haven't already, please consider subscribing to this channel for more videos on video creation in the future.